Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag and drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way.
The trailer, Andy, for Die Hard, we're I don't even know. I know that my, let's see, this came out in 88.
Yes.
So I guess I was a teenager. I was in the right spot for this movie to hit, and it's just mayhem and chaos and bullets.
It's
Nonsense.
an 80s action trailer, and I think that's what they were going for. Well, it's a mix of 80s action, and I think they were also trying to throw in little bits of that Bruce Willis charm, because this was really early in his film career. I mean, most people knew him as the funny guy in Moonlighting, the kind of funny guy / romantic character in that brilliant TV show. And yes, he had been in Blind Date, but that was a comedy. Yes, he'd been in Sunset, also a comedy. Nobody was really expecting this funny guy to be an action hero. And so it's a blend of playing up the action and then little hints of the comedy. So you're getting kind of a little mix of both.
But it's chaos.
It's a pretty chaotic, but it's chaotic. But actually, as I watch it, I'm like, you know what? They're doing a good job in setting it up in a way where I can't really tell what might be a climactic moment toward the end, what might be an action moment toward the beginning. So in context of that and what we sometimes get with trailers, at least it's all over the place. So it doesn't really clue me in to saying, wow, that trailer is full of spoilers.
At least it's all over the place is high praise. High praise indeed. This is possibly the least artfully created trailer that I think we've seen since we've started talking about trailers. You have a point. The benefit that they have here, working with a movie like this is they just have a lot of chaos to choose from. And that they also, this is a movie which we'll talk about momentarily. This is a movie about roadblocks, right? This is a movie about a hero overcoming everything that's thrown at him. And so presenting those in order, out of order, it doesn't really matter. They can give away a lot of story in the trailer and still have it not feel spoilery.
Yes.
Which is definitely to its credit. That's a benefit that they just get by, working on a film like this. So, but the trailer it's nonsense and chaos. And I think, here I am, middle-aged me would be, less swayed by this trailer than certainly middle-teened me was.
You know what
absolutely was.
What we should have done is gone back and looked at some other like mid to late 80s action trailers to see how it compares. Yeah. Like I'd be really curious to see how this compares to Commando or Predator or RoboCop or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure they're all the same.
Probably.
I think you're totally right. In fact, we could probably just start cutting in sequences from all of those movies, and it would still feel like an advertisement for Die Hard.
Right.
It's Christmas Eve in L.A.
California.
Is Daddy coming home soon?
Well, we'll see what Santa and Mommy can do, okay?
And New York cop John McClane has come to see his wife.
I missed you.
Instead, he's going to have to save her.
Sit down.
Within this skyscraper high above the city, 12 terrorists have declared war.
They're about to be taught a lesson in the real use of power.
They're as brilliant
because I am interested in the $640 million in your vault.
As they are ruthless.
But I'm telling you, you're just going to have to kill me. Okay.
This is The Next Reel, everybody. I'm Pete Wright, and that over there is Andy Nelson.
Hey, hey, hey. Or should I say, ho, ho, ho.
Yes, you should. And we spoil movies. Tonight on the show, it's our holiday spectacular. We're heading out to the coast with John McClane to have a few laughs in the 1998 John McTiernan Christmas classic, Die Hard. Before we get into that, you should learn more about us at thenextreel.com, subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast app, or follow us on Twitter and Facebook at The Next Reel.
And if you enjoy this show and are interested in supporting our ongoing work investigating great film, please consider a regular donation through our Patreon page. You'll get to join our back channel conversations on Slack and listen to the members-only weekend show, The Saturday Matinee. Just head on over to patreon.com/thenextreel.
You just destroyed a building.
Okay, Andy, I think we should get it out of the way. I think because of the consternation, the Durmenstrang around Star Wars, I think there are people who are there. I know there are people who are concerned that we're going to slam Die Hard.
Yes, there probably are a few people concerned that
those people should rest easy. Tell me they should rest easy.
They should rest easy. Rest easy, people.
God, I love this movie so much. I love it so much. If I were ever to be accused of fanboying over a movie, this would be the one.
This is it.
Yeah. I don't care. What problems are there? It's a little racist. Sure, it's pretty sexist. What problems? What entire lack of cultural resonance does this film have? I can't hear you.
The things there are I got in trouble when we were talking about Star Trek 6 and I said, it's a 5-star film, but it has some quibbles or I have some quibbles with it. I think I'm in the same boat here. I do feel that I might have some quibbles with some elements within this film, but who cares about those quibbles? This movie is so stinking good. It's way up at in the top tier of my list. It's just brilliant. I always loved it, always have. And it's going to be a fun one to kind of kick off this entire franchise and see how the rest of the films hold up.
I'm going to pretend that we're not talking about any of the other films because, like today I want to hold this film precious.
Yes.
So I love a lot of things about this film. I actually read the book recently. You remember when I read the book? I was all over you.
Vaguely, yeah, I do actually. I had forgot about that. What were your thoughts on the book? Remind me.
Well,
this is the 1979 novel by Roderick Thorpe. Nothing Lasts Forever, a sequel to his 1966 novel, The Detective.
It's like you've read the book, Andy. You know everything there is to know already.
Oh, really?
No, I'm kidding. That was a joke. That was a gag. So, yes, it is the sequel to The Detective, which makes it weird, right? It's a sequel to another story about a different character. The character is Detective Joe Leland, right? And he's actually going to not some anonymous, big business. He's going to a very specific oil company, right? The Klaxon Oil Corporation, and he's visiting his daughter at her Christmas party. It's not his, estranged wife. And the gang, they are Germans, a German gang, and it's led by Anton Little Tony Gruber, and Joe Leland, the detective, and Little Tony had actually met each other during World War II when Joe was a fighter pilot. So that's all kind of backstory in the narrative, right? That's all in there. In the narrative, they have a long history of one another, like having a memory of one another as they encounter one another in the Klaxon oil building. My memory of the book is that it is much more of an activist narrative than Die Hard is, right? Die Hard, we have these guys who actually care nothing for the sort of patriotic act of terrorism. In the movie with Hans Gruber, they make a joke out of all of the imprisoned brothers and sisters in arms around the world in different terrorist groups. And in this movie, they actually are, exposing Klaxon Corporation's dealings with other terrorists. Like, it is a patriotic act that they're taking on. And so it has a very different worldview, kind of an intention around, the acts of resistance that are going on around the world.
And what I read about it is that they're actually planning on stealing this $6 million to dump out the windows as an act of protest.
Yes, that's exactly right. And so again, this has this sort of cultural patriotism at its very heart. Whereas Die Hard, they're a bunch of robbers, right? They're going to be sitting on the beach earning 20%,
right? And
so it is really different, but unbelievably, they actually keep the action beats in the movie from the book. Like, they took a lot more from the book than I think many other sort of action adaptations do. It's definitely one of the more sort of high fidelity adaptations in terms of those particular beats that I thought were really good. So it is definitely commercial fiction, right? It is not literary fiction. It is a great read. It reads like a rocket ship. I mean, you just slam through it. And I happen to, when I'm on my summer reading bender, those kinds of rocket ship books are I just love to devour those things. So I was a big fan of the book. I had a lot of fun reading it. What is strange about it, for me, is that this book is not about a guy named John McClane. The second book, here I am already talking about Die Hard 2. The second movie was based on a book as well, not by Roderick Thorpe, not in the same series at all, but about a different main character from much of a different perspective. So, but also based on a book. And I hadn't known either of those things when I first became a fan of Die Hard 1 and 2.
Well, and this will be fun to continue talking about in this franchise, because by the time we get to the third one, that was based on a script that was a completely different world. And they took, again, the McClane character and found a way to shoehorn him into that story as well. So it's interesting how all of this kind of continues playing out, at least across the first three films.
We've got Anton Little Tony Gruber, not Hans Gruber. We do have Gennaro, Stephanie Gennaro, not Holly Gennaro. But Stephanie is actually having an affair with Harry Ellis, who we do have in the movie.
Again, Stephanie is the daughter, not the wife.
Stephanie is the daughter, not the wife. Al Powell makes it. He makes it almost unchanged from the book. Dwayne Robinson also makes it. Carl, Anton's right-hand man, Carl makes it. And he, again, wants nothing but Leland's blood. and Harry Ellis makes it as well. So, there are a lot of characters that make it directly across, but John McClane, so getting back into the movie.
Well,
go ahead.
Well, and this is a question for you because you have read the book. And so I'm really curious because this film is such a great example of taking this cop hero that we have and making him just kind of this ordinary guy. Like for the vast majority of the film, he's not even really actively trying to stop or I shouldn't say the majority, but for the first half of the film, he's not trying to actively stop the terrorists. He's trying to get the cops to show up. He's trying to do everything he can to bring reinforcements in so they can save the day, which I think is a really interesting idea for kind of the hero of your story. And it's not really until kind of things continue progressing where he's actually actively trying to stop them. I think that's so fascinating. How does that play out in the book? Is it the same, or is he really kind of still kind of the cop who had gone to World War II with the bad guy, and here he was running around trying to stop them?
I would say it's even more to the latter. It's even more to the John McClane side, right? He is coming back from the Second World War with PTSD. He's struggling, having seen what he has seen and experienced what he'd experienced in as a fighter pilot, and he's retired, right? He's not even a cop anymore. He still carries his weapon, but it's because he is terrified of terrorists, right? He's terrified again as a result of his PTSD. They don't talk about it as PTSD in the book, if I remember. But it's very clearly it's that shell shock syndrome, and so he absolutely does not want to get involved in what is happening in the book. He is drawn into it as a result of wanting to keep his daughter safe. And so when you look at it in terms of narrative beats, right, what does the character want? It is very clear that he is only doing what he's doing to keep his daughter safe and make sure he can do what he needs to do to keep the people safe in the but at the expense of his daughter's safety, right? Okay. And that's very much what we get in Die Hard 2, right? John McClane, we look at what he wants. He wants his wife safely back to him. And he's got a lot of complex emotions going on in there. And we have that beautiful conversation between them in the bathroom, after, right around Fist With Your Toes, where he's trying to come to terms with the fact that they're not together anymore. And you can tell he wants her back. And so his primary motivation in this movie is to make sure she's safe. In large part, I would submit to resolve that conversation that never got resolved in the bathroom. So it really is, in terms of character motivation, it pulls straight from the book, and I think it does so very well.
Well, and they build on that brilliantly also at the emotional low point at the end of the second act when he's sitting there, pulling glass shards out of his feet, talking to Al, saying, just in case I don't make it, tell my wife I love her, that I'm sorry. Like that whole conversation that he has with Al is really kind of the perfect moment for him to kind of have that moment of resolution with the relationship and finally open his eyes to the realities of the mistakes that he's been making, and that he needs to be there for his wife. And it's a beautifully constructed story, and the way that his character arc plays across that is it's incredibly fluid, and it may fall under kind of the classic Hollywood storytelling, but it's also perfect Hollywood storytelling. It's done so well.
I think it's even a little bit unfair to call this classic Hollywood storytelling. It's classic storytelling.
Oh,
right?
sure,
I mean,
sure, yeah, right.
Well, but to your point, like we write off movies like this in large part because they are they're popcorn movies, and they're entertaining and they're great, but they also they give us exactly what we want. They have all of the required elements in a story like this, right? I mean, we have all of the character moments we need. We have all of the emotional moments we need, and we have a main character who is likable, funny, congenial, and all he does in this movie, it seems like, is try to overcome the obstacles that are thrown ahead of him, right? It's only in the third act where he starts to take more active control of the situation and tries to get ahead of his captor. But mostly he's just coming up, again and again and again in front of the obstacles that are thrown up against him in the story. And watching him react is the fun of this story, whether it's whether it can be written off as formulaic. It's formulaic because we as human organisms adore the formula in large part. We're wired to it.
Well, and I should clarify. I meant, classic Hollywood storytelling, just in the sense that in the terms of the 3-act structure of a screenplay, it's hitting the beats perfectly. Like everything lines up exactly as it should.
And to the stopwatch, practically.
Right, and it's done really, really well. I mean, it's spot on perfect. But you're right. Outside of that, just in the world of classic storytelling, it is also just pretty perfectly constructed.
We talk a lot about Hans Gruber. He's become kind of the iconic villain, but why is he the iconic villain?
What's interesting about Hans is that it's interesting because he's an iconic villain, but I think a lot of it goes to the way that the screenwriters, Jeb Stewart and Stephen E. D'Souza, mainly D'Souza, because I think Jeb Stewart wrote it first and then D'Souza came in to do the rewrites and everything, at least the way that the credits are laid out. D'Souza, he chose to write the script as if Hans Gruber were the protagonist of the story. He actually said if he had not planned the robbery and put it together, Bruce Willis would have just gone to the party and reconciled or not with his wife. You should sometimes think all about looking at your movie through the point of view of the villain who is really driving the narrative. And I honestly think that that is one of the smartest ways to have approached this script and look at it through Hans Gruber's eyes and say, okay, he's the one who's driving this entire story. How can I work the script to give him all of the beats so that he's essentially kind of going through the motions of getting everything he wants? You have that brilliant moment early in the film where you don't get all of the plan, but the script does a brilliant job of with its setups and payoffs and the telegraphing moment when the police are coming and Hans tells his people, who are all freaking out, he says police action was inevitable and, as it so happens, necessary, which is a strange line for the villain to be saying. It's like he was wanting police action. What does that mean? And it's a great moment to kind of set up down the road how he needed them to shut down the grid so that they could actually get into the safe. It's brilliantly constructed, but it's done with the cool and calm of a man who knows exactly what he's doing and knows how to make it happen.
Yeah, I love that discussion of perspective too, because it really demonstrates in this character of Hans Gruber, it's a guy who, in terms of character desire, right, he knows exactly what he wants. He wants these financial rewards. He wants security that comes from a life without wanting. He wants to be on a beach earning 20%, and he has come to terms at the point when he reaches the building, Nakatomi Plaza. He's come to terms with everything he is willing to do to achieve those goals, and that makes his character so much stronger. He's not responding to as much as John McClane is, but when it comes time to respond, they've built the rule set around Hans Gruber, the character, so that all of his actions make sense in the scope of his objectives. And I think that is just perfect. When they lose the detonators, find those detonators, they, it makes sense what he orders his people to do in order to get those detonators back, because we understand clearly his objectives.
And also earlier, when McClane is running around causing problems, it's like just a little bit of a fly in the ointment. It's not so horrible yet that he's just like, okay, he's in the elevator shaft. Don't worry about it. We'll deal with him later. Let's just get our job done. You'll have some time. You can go hunt him down and do what you want. But right now, let's focus on the job. It's not a big thing that McClane is out there. It's a little pesky, but it's not awful. And I think that's really interesting, the way that actually plays out.
Andy, would you say that McClane is pesking Gruber?
I'd say he is.
Is that what he's doing?
Pesking Gruber. That's right.
Okay, I just want to lock that in. I think that's a really great point, because while we know as an audience that his decision, not to take McClane more seriously earlier actually is to his own detriment, it still fits within his objectives. He knows what he wants and what he's willing to do to get it, and he is moving forward with the plan because that's his central objective, and he doesn't need to worry about McClane, and that ends up being something that challenges him later, and that is a central conflict between these two characters because he didn't take him more seriously earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. It is interesting how he is always kind of feeling like he's getting ahead of him, or at least staying ahead. And I don't think it's really until he ends up with the detonators that things start going awry. But then what's great about that is he feels that he's kind of got the upper hand again, because he sees that he has bare feet, and the whole idea of shoot the glass. He's constantly coming up with ways to really kind of stay ahead of McClane. And I think that is another element that's just so interesting with your villain, is that this is a guy who's largely smarter than McClane is. And it's only McClane just, pesking him so much that he gets to, that he has to continue to deal with it.
And those little moments, I mean, then it just gets down to smart writing, right, and smart dialogue, and the shoot the glass bit is smart too, because it's an order of elegance, right? They have very heavy duty firepower, like they clearly have grenades, they clearly have these flashbangs, they clearly could, they can do a lot of damage, but shooting the glass is not just an order of murderous villainy. It is an elegant order. I don't know. There's something that strikes me about it as both gentle and brutal at the same time.
Yes, even if it's handled in a Monty Python-esque way, which always makes me laugh, where he says it in German, and Carl's like, "What?"
Yeah,
and he's like,
"What?
Shoot the glass!
Shoot the glass!"
Okay. Let me say that for our American watchers. Oh, no, it's great. It really is. But back to the smart writing. This film is set, it just throughout, it's brilliantly filled with setups and payoffs that work so nicely, whether it's the fight that Holly and John have at the beginning that gets her so infuriated that she slams their picture down, which becomes a key element later, revealing who John McClane is and who Holly Gennaro is to Hans when he finally picks it up. That's a brilliant moment. The fact that he, fists with your toes, that he learns right in the very first scene in the movie, and how that puts him into this vulnerable position of being barefoot through the entire film. Like I said, the police action that Hans was waiting for, that was great. The fantastic moment of Al getting set up with, he's kind of this desk jockey. He's afraid of guns now. And then he's the one who kind of does that final save at the end. And even the famous, the conversation that they have about, you're just a cowboy, John Wayne, all this. I was always partial to Roy Rogers. And then he kind of refers to him as, do you really think you have a chance against us, Mr. Cowboy? And that sets up the brilliant yippee-ki-yay line that we have through the entire franchise that has kind of created this entire thing in and of itself.
One of the things that Willis said in an interview when talking about his character is, in the research that he'd done with the detectives that he'd worked with to try to build this character, one of the things that came out of it is that adrenaline, when you're in this kind of a situation, adrenaline brings out a weird sort of dark comedy, right? This black comedy, like so much of Willis talking to himself, of Willis's banter with Alan Rickman. So much of that character banter is based on, his research around adrenaline making you funnier, or making you at least appear funnier. It's that whole thing, if I wasn't laughing, I'd be crying, that comes out of being in a situation like this. And so much of this was Willis, doing the research and trying to find a more authentic approach, not just, trying to be a smart-ass screenwriter, but really trying to capture in the moment what it feels like to be so stressed, and in sort of mortal peril. And I actually really like knowing that about, the research. It makes it a little bit more authentic of an experience, I think, to watch him.
Is that also why Bruce Willis is so perfect at talking to himself?
I think he's just naturally great at talking to himself. I imagine he does it all the time.
There are some actors who do that not so well, but Bruce Willis is so good at just like running around a room, having a conversation with himself. He does it so well here. It's just fantastic. I do have a few questions about some of his thinking, and maybe this is, the downside to adrenaline running through your body in these sorts of situations. But you've got, so I get that he's trying to get Al's attention, and so he throws a body out the window to kind of scare him and get his blood moving so that he actually gets the police coming and everything. But then he starts shooting the gun at him. Now I have to question, okay, at first I was like, oh, maybe he's just shooting the gun around the car. But then you have like all the hits on the tops of the car and it's all sparking and stuff. And I'm like, okay, maybe the terrorists are shooting at him. But I'm like, no, it pretty much is Bruce Willis standing there with a gun in the window. What if he killed the guy? It's like I have to question his logic in that moment. It's
right. So we'll write that off to the trauma of of mortal peril too.
Likewise, when he's trying to get the crowd down, I mean, they're all on the rooftop, and sure, they're panicking and everything, but they know who he is, and he talks to, well, some of them do. He's talking to Holly's assistant, and she's not up here and everything, but he can't get them to move down, so he starts shooting over their heads. Granted, but still, it's like that's a terrible way to get people's attention.
Yeah.
Oh,
I guess it is. I let that one go because he is obviously shooting up over their head, but I have to imagine that some of them are going to be in so much peril that they just pass out, just drop where they stand. Right? They just like, this did not work the way you intended it to work.
Exactly. And then he's going to be dragging the pregnant woman off the roof. And
Right. Let's get really dark. I mean, how many of them would just say, I give up, I'm running off the building? And you have this whole lemming situation where a whole crowd of people flies off the top of the building. It's terrible.
It is terrible.
Who would do that?
Right. I know.
Terrible.
And then
can we talk about walkie-talkies? Because I know you had this question too.
Oh my goodness.
How do they work?
Yeah. Well, it's really funny because the whole idea of interrupting someone on a walkie-talkie is just not realistic in the world of walkie-talkie usage. I've used enough walkie-talkies on set where it's like when somebody else is talking on a walkie-talkie, you can't push the button down and interrupt them. It doesn't work that way. And it works effectively in the screenplay. And, largely you just don't pay attention to that sort of thing. But it's just like, come on, that's not how walkie-talkies work. Likewise, there are times where, and I can't remember what Bruce Willis is doing, but there's a moment where Al is listening and he hears him doing something. It might be when he's pulling the glass out of his feet. And he's like, you okay there, Roy? And it's just like, so what? He was doing this while he was also holding the button on the walkie-talkie so that Al could hear him making grunts and groans.
Well, okay. To be fair, there are some brands of walkie-talkie that have a
Vox,
hold, the open box, right?
Yeah.
You can just turn it on. But if that was the case, like Al wouldn't be able to talk back because a walkie-talkie, you can either walkie or you can talkie. You cannot walkie and talkie.
Oh yes, yeah. It's kind of silly. It's one of those things. It's definitely a screenwriter's world here, where this is how walkie-talkies work within the context of this film, because it's not very realistic, and largely it's not something that's ever bothered me. But it's just definitely a fun talking point.
Yeah, right.
I do want to talk about the terrorist count also, because I thought it was very funny as we were going through. My wife and I were trying to count the terrorists because they say it's a dozen terrorists. You got 12, and you're counting down, and there's this point where they're like, well, I think Al says to the FBI guys that there are 7, we're down to 7, because of this guy in there, blah, blah, blah. And then so we're counting down. Okay, so then they got him, and then they got him, and now we're down to 5, and now we're down. And then we get to this point where we thought we were down to, because let's see, he gotten Carl, who is up in the roof, and the one Asian German guy. And then the fantastic little bit with Argyle crashing into Theo. So we're down to 2. But then there's all of a sudden this mysterious young terrorist guy that is running out of the room, and McClane pops him before he goes to confront the Texan guy and Hans. And I'm like, wait, where did this young kid come from? This young terrorist that all of a sudden just showed up. And my wife and I were cracking up about it because in the credits we're counting, okay, did we get it wrong? And there are 13 listed. And so now my wife and I have this joke about this whole idea. It's a baker's dozen of terrorists that the film actually has.
Okay.
It's just
See, I thought of it differently, Andy. For me, it's Stockholm Syndrome. They didn't talk about this in the movie at all, but I think one of the hostages converted in the middle of the story and picked up a gun. I was like, well, if you can't beat him, everybody.
Yeah, right. I love it.
How can I get in on this?
$6.5 million? I'll sign me up.
Right? I'd like a piece of that action. I'll take a little bit, right off the top.
He did look like the young intern that hadn't settled in his career yet.
This is good opportunity.
That's right. I saw an opportunity and I took it.
In Die Hard on Broadway, that would be played by Matthew Broderick.
Oh,
in Die Hard the musical, I think they were talking about that. It's the young intern. It's from the perspective of the young intern.
I love it. Oh,
how to succeed in terrorism.
Oh, God. Merry Christmas, folks. There it is.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about how. If we can. Oh man, I want to listen to the soundtrack.
I do too. I want
musical right now.
I want to hear the song of McClane at his emotional low point.
I hear it's Sondheim. I think Sondheim is. I think Sondheim's that the music is incredibly complex.
Fantastic. I can't wait to see the inevitable high school version.
Into the opening track into Nakatomi. It's so gloomy.
Or is it called California?
With a K. They made some changes.
Oh, my.
Okay. How did this movie get made, Andy, please?
Goodness gracious. Yeah, so this was it was so interesting. I did not realize this, but because this was based on the book that was a sequel to the 1966 novel The Detective, that was a book that had been adapted with Frank Sinatra as the lead in the movie The Detective, which I haven't seen. I've heard some things about, but I really just don't know much about it. But what I found so interesting is that Frank Sinatra had contractual obligation to be in any sequel to that movie. And so 20th Century Fox actually had to offer the role to Frank Sinatra before anybody else because of that fact, which I think is hilarious. I can't even imagine Frank Sinatra. Not only can I not imagine him in the role, I can't imagine him as a 72-year-old man being this character, which is how
old he was.
What's
weird about that, Andy, though? That would have fit the book better.
That's crazy. You're right. It would have, because World War II and everything. Yeah.
Right. That is bananas.
Puts a very strange spin on the entire thing.
Maybe on Broadway again. I could see that. Sinatra and Broderick. I can see that I can see that billing. I can see it, but not the movie. Certainly not the movie we got. A lighthearted comedy, maybe.
Yes. So, after that, Fox said, "Okay, well, let's get Arnold Schwarzenegger in. We'll make this."
Sinatra turned it down. I can think of only one alternative. It's Arnold Schwarzenegger.
I know. Well, it's obviously Sinatra was just the obligated contractual nod to offer it to him. But then they were trying to go, okay, well, we need to make this a big action movie, so let's get Schwarzenegger in. We can adapt it to be a sequel to Commando. That didn't pan out. They offered it to Stallone. That didn't. He said no. Don Johnson said no. Harrison Ford said no. Richard Gere, Clint Eastwood, Burt Reynolds, all these people were offered the part, and they all said no. They were talking to CinemaScore, which is the company that tracks audience reactions to movies. And they said, hey, this Bruce Willis guy, he's very popular with the crowds. The demographic data hit exactly what they were looking for. And he wasn't definitely McTiernan or 20th Century Fox's choice for the role, but the demographic data from CinemaScore was enough to persuade them to cast him. What was interesting about that is the information from CinemaScore also kept them from, when they did the marketing for the movie, they said, whatever you do, don't market it with Bruce Willis like with his face on the posters or the billboards or anything. Market it just focusing on the action, not this fact that this comedy star is helming your action movie. All of which they did, and they cast it with Bruce Willis, and he got paid $5 million to be in the role, which at the time was unheard of for somebody who was of his caliber to kind of lead a film. Certainly stars like, at the time, Warren Beatty or Dustin Hoffman would get that much, but not an untested movie star. So it was pretty interesting that Bruce Willis got paid so much. And they justified it, though, saying, hey, you know what? he's got to be the man leading the charge of this film. So we're going to give him the money to be the face of the movie. And sure enough, it worked. So there he is. What else is interesting is this is a movie where, now I don't know how the book ends, but the movie, they didn't have the ending sorted out yet when they were writing it. And so, which I think is funny because when you see the terrorists arrive, they pull in the Pacific Courier truck into the parking garage of the building, and you see them open up the back. All it is in the back is a big empty shell. It's just a giant empty truck. And all the terrorists get out and they run inside and start their terrorizing. At the end of the movie, the back of the truck rolls up and an ambulance drives out. One, that truck was not big enough at the beginning to actually fit an ambulance inside. Two, they already showed us it was empty. Oh, these things that you don't pay attention to when you're just going along for the ride. But it's clear that they were really not, they just didn't know what they were doing yet with the ending, which I think is pretty funny.
Let's do the deep scene dive, Andy.
Yes, let's do it.
So the deep scene dive we're talking about today, this is the meeting between McClane and Gruber when Gruber was checking the explosives on the roof, and it ends up being discovered by McClane, and so Gruber changes his accent and pretends to be a hostage. Why did we select this?
I think we picked it because it really is a brilliant moment where you have your hero and villain meeting each other face to face for the first time. It's an hour and a half into the film. It's this really just brilliant moment of these two actors as they kind of come together. You don't know exactly how it's going to play, and I think that these two actors. I mean, this scene really for me just cemented how brilliant these two were together. And you get this interesting tension between the two of them. You get this doubt, the way that it's written. Like, does McClane know that this is Hans? Does Hans, is Hans going to be able to sneak away and get his gun that he so foolishly kind of leaves off to the side? It's constructed in a really brilliant way. And it really kind of puts that audience, mindset in this place of doubt where you just don't exactly know what's going to happen. And it's just a beautifully constructed scene. Not only that, but that it's the moment that leads to the fantastic reveal of our hero has bare feet, and that's a great way to get him.
It's perfect also because of the performances of these two guys. In Gruber and Alan Rickman's Gruber, we actually discover that Rickman can do a pretty convincing American accent. It's not completely convincing, but it's pretty convincing and convincing enough, but probably not convincing enough to, John McClane, whose, real showpiece in this scene is, his crafty intellect, right? That he's actually, it turns out in the second half of the scene, he's already ahead of Rickman and of Gruber, and was all along, which I love, right? He hands him the empty gun, and then we get that reveal as Gruber starts speaking German. The camera work here is, well, it's great. We've got a lot of wonderful sort of low angles, interesting ways to portray the faces of these characters. But the final reveal when we have that shot with Willis's face looking back over his shoulder, blurred out, we have Gruber speaking German into the radio, is just fantastic. It is the way to sort of reveal who these characters really are.
Well, and on top of that, I mean, we should say it's split. We've got an interruption of the FBI guys partway through the sequence that we're discussing. But you get this this brilliant change in the way that the scenes are constructed. The first part of it, where it starts off with Hans going up to the roof to check on the detonators and everything, and then kind of him meeting McClane and all of that sort of stuff. That's all shot effectively. It all works really nicely. But when we come back to it after the FBI interruption, the whole thing is shot Dutch angle. Everything is slightly tilted, and you get just a little more of this sense of that. It's almost like that cinematic unease that it does. It puts you in this place where it's like something feels slightly amiss here. I can't quite figure out what it is. Who's playing who? And I think it's done so well. Also, I think what it does is it highlights just the smarts that Hans has, because McClane asks, "Oh, what's your name?" And he says, Bill Clay, who is on the board of employees. And it just, I don't know, it's just one of those moments that, again, goes to highlight how smart Hans is, that he almost had set up this alibi. Like, if he gets caught, I'm going to play like I'm this Bill Clay guy who's at this building. But the whole thing plays out with these Dutch angles, and it builds to that just brilliant payoff, like you said, when Hans speaks German into the walkie-talkie and pulls the gun on McClane.
It's beautiful. To your point about all the Dutch angles, I mean, this is Jan de Bont as cinematographer on this thing, and he just really knows how to move camera. And the only thing that would make this sequence, I think, more intense is a minor walking bass line. You know what I mean? Like boom, 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 boom. Like it's a perfect kind of noir film. Put this in black and white, and suddenly you complete the picture. It's a fantastic homage of these two sort of heads of their respective narratives. I think it's just great.
My favorite shot in the sequence is actually the moment after McClane gives him the gun and says, "Come on," starts walking, and the camera is Dutch angle on the ground right behind McClane as he starts walking off, and then you just see Hans's cigarette hit the ground, and with his fancy dress shoe, he just kind of snuffs his cigarette, and you know exactly what's about to happen. It's such a great setup for the moment. So it is great shot.
Production design, Jackson Segovia, art design, John Jensen, set design, Philip Leonard. This movie was shot at the Fox Plaza Century City, and much of the design of this scene is, it's rooftop accoutrements, right? It's HVAC systems and grates.
For the first half, right? The second half, it's like they go back down into I don't know which floor, but it's a floor that has some office stuff, and it's still kind of under construction, like so much of it. What was so great about filming in Fox Plaza is it was actually under construction still, and so they actually had some empty floors, which worked really well in context of what they were trying to do here. And so it gave them a lot of kind of pre-created sets, which worked really nicely. Obviously, some of it was stage and stuff that they recreated, but they did a great job. What I thought was funny is that Fox made this movie. They funded it and everything. They also shot it in Fox Plaza in their property. But McTiernan actually said, they still charged us, to use their building. And I was like, of course they did. He's like, I don't know how much money they made, but they charged standard rates. It was still a really expensive property to shoot on. And I was laughing about that. And I was telling my wife, who does property management, she's like, well, of course they do. It's a totally different entity. And she totally justified the whole thing. I'm like, oh, okay, well, I guess I can't argue about this with you, but still.
Right. Maybe not the right audience.
Right, exactly. She's like, yeah, of course, they better. She's totally on their side, the property side.
That's so funny. Your wife's such an industrialist.
Right.
It's a very cool building. I love them talking about shooting there, trying to, can we find a location where it's a real building that'll let us, fire machine guns and blow stuff up.
Right.
That's brilliant. Just a comment on the effects and the miniature effects. This is not at work in this particular scene, obviously, since this is a predominantly dialogue scene, but the miniature effects, building the building and making the building look right as they blow up entire floors of the building, were really cool. And largely the guy behind the miniature stuff and the forced perspective stuff is a guy named Thaine Morris at Boss Effects. And they had both a forced perspective elevator, which I didn't know how they would do this, but they had however it was, how many floors, probably 32 floors or something of this elevator that they built in just, 12, I want to say it was like 12 feet or something like that. It was very, very small. No, that's not, it's much too small. I can't remember. I didn't write down the numbers. Anyway, the whole point was this building long elevator shaft. They built it very, very short, and everything got smaller. It was little tiny lights as they get shorter and shorter down there to drop the chair with the explosives on. I thought that was really cool. Forced perspective on the Gruber fall, but they still dropped Rickman about 40 feet,
70 feet
off of this. 70 feet.
70 feet.
I heard him in an interview, and he said it was 40 feet. but his memory was clearly jarred by the fall. Just drop the actor is what they said. So he said, we had no CGI, so they just said drop the actor. So I got to fall. But the way they built the building, right? They had two models of the building. One was about 30 feet tall, and that was the building in its entirety, and one was just just like the top 12 floors. In order to, actually, do close-ups of the granite and black glass face of the building, they actually went and just photographed high-resolution photographs of the side of the real Fox Plaza building and pasted them onto this scaffolding. So all of it looks like a real night reflection, because it was a real night reflection, but they could only shoot it in certain angles, or the reflections would be off.
So funny.
I thought that was very cool.
Yeah, it was really interesting the lengths they went to make this work, and just the complexities of filming there. Again, it doesn't tie to our scene, but just the fact that they have to blow up that entire third floor at one point when the explosive go off. And how complicated that was with spreading glass everywhere, and the amount of work they had to do it. And they had to promise Fox, we can have all of this done in a weekend, and you'll come in a Monday morning and everything will be cleaned up. All of that stuff will be out of the grass, and the where they had been driving the vehicles and all that stuff. They had like a weekend to kind of get a lot of that stuff done, which is crazy. And then the helicopters, when they have the helicopters flying in, it took like 6 months of negotiations with the city to get them to be able to fly those helicopters through the roads, or just over the roads like they did, and come up over the building. The city only gave them 2 hours to do everything with the helicopters. So you look at what they accomplish in those 2 hours. It's a lot of stuff. I think McTiernan said he had somewhere between 6 and 9 camera teams filming all the different shots that they needed.
There was a funny story of the scale helicopter, right? The miniature helicopter that they were filming, not at Fox Plaza, but on Boss's site out in the parking lot. And the first helicopter they brought in to do the destruction on top when the helicopter takes out the roof. They brought it in. They said the guy who was running this thing was amazing. He was incredibly talented. And then something happened, and the helicopter careened into the scaffolding at the base of this giant building that we'd built, this top 12 floors, and blew up. And we thought, oh my God, it's going to take down the entire set of the building that we actually need to take down with an explosion, but it's going to do it on accident. And it didn't, and they didn't. But I thought that was one of the little bits of blowing up helicopter irony.
It's funny because you look at stuff like this and how brilliant it ended up working out and everything. But it's also, you can see why with stories like that, why, people argue now, let's just do it in CG because we can get everything to go exactly as we want. We can get the helicopter to move exactly as we want. It's not going to accidentally, knock down the set, all of that sort of stuff. You can see why there is a logic to it, even if there are times where you're watching the CG and go, gosh, I wish that I was just watching real miniatures and real explosions.
Right.
So what do you think of Bruce and his shirt? Marilyn Vance did the costumes, and here we have this man running around in a wife beater that starts white.
Yeah, and then just gets filthy over the course of our time with him, and then he's not wearing it anymore.
I like that it goes, it's about the time where he's in the elevator shaft, I think. It goes from smudgy white to all of a sudden, it is so saturated with like dirt and grease. It's like, what? How did he just get it that dirty?
Yeah.
I think they actually said that the costume, when he was crawling in the air vents and he comes out, they actually were debating when he jumps out of the air vent to actually have some dirt fall down first, just to highlight how the shirt got so dirty suddenly.
Because it looks like he instantly started sweating coffee.
Right, exactly. Oh, it's so funny.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
Yeah.
Should we talk about Michael Kamen?
This is a score that I think works brilliantly in context of the film. It's not like a score that's just easy to listen to. It's not like a fantastic bunch of tunes to put on. But I think what Michael Kamen does works really well in context of the film. In particular, I mean, his score is great, but what I think I really enjoy is the fact that he took Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, Ode to Joy, and kind of adapted it into kind of a leitmotif for the terrorists. And you get these little hints of it throughout. I love how that kind of hits in there, here and there, so nicely.
The very first thing we have here, the sleigh bells,
yes.
as he's standing, as Willis comes up to the luggage carousel, the sleigh bells start in the very opening of the film, and they're detuned a little bit. Do you notice that?
Yeah.
I find that amazing. It is an amazing touch that the sleigh bells don't sound quite right. It is a wonderful nod to the not quite rightness that is about to come in this movie. I think it's terrific.
What's interesting about that, Pete, is that sets up for a lot of people the never-ending debate about whether this is a Christmas movie or not.
Is it a debate anymore? I think this is.
It is a debate. People will forever debate the idea of a Christmas movie is only a movie that deals with Christmas themes at the holidays. This takes place at Christmas. Largely, everything about it is kind of set in Christmas, but it's a robbery movie. It in no way is a Christmas story. So there is kind of a debate about that. I'm firmly in the camp that says this is just a flat out Christmas movie. I don't care what those naysayers say. I think it's more a Christmas movie than something like Lethal Weapon. But I still could say that kind of still is a Christmas movie too. But this one definitely is.
It's locked because we have positioned it in the canon of next real holiday discussions.
And if we say it, it's official.
I say the debate is over.
But you've got Run DMC. You've got what is the song that they have, Christmas in Hollis, that you have at the beginning of the film. You've got Let It Snow ending the film, Vaughn Monroe singing. It's it feels pretty firmly planted in the land of Christmas. So I'm totally fine calling it a Christmas movie. I think it's my wife. It's her annual when she's wrapping Christmas presents. It's her annual movie to put on and wrap presents to. So it feels very holiday-ish.
I've got to ask. There is according to the IMDb Die Hard soundtrack, we've got Singing in the Rain, Winter Wonderland, Christmas in Hollis, Skeletons by Stevie Wonder, Let It Snow, Let It Snow, Let It Snow, Sammy Kahn and Jewel Stein. And then we have a bunch of uncredited stuff on the soundtrack, including, as we've said, Ode to Joy, Jingle Bells, Brandenburg Concerto No. 3 in G major. We've Got Each Other from Man on Fire in 1987 by John Scott, Resolution and Hyperspace from Aliens 1986, James Horner. And Let It Snow, Let It Snow, Let It Snow is obviously credited again as hummed by Reginald Vell Johnson. I like that. Where was the Aliens bit?
Okay, so there were a few temp tracks that were left in. McTiernan didn't like some of the bits that Michael Kamen wrote right at the very end of the film. The two things that you just mentioned, Man on Fire, John Scott's score from the 1987 film, when McClane and Al Powell see each other for the first time. That is the music from Man on Fire. It was a temp track that they had in the editing, and he just didn't like what Kamen did, so he left that. Likewise, when Carl pops up and he's like, "Rah!" and the final moment there, and
that was Aliens.
And Al pulls his gun out and shoots. Yeah, that's the climactic moment when the alien gets blasted out of the space lock. The Alien Queen. It's James Horner's score. I didn't notice that. I know.
It always sounds so familiar. Whenever I watch both of those movies, of course, it's those movies because I've seen them too many times.
I've never seen Man on Fire, so I wouldn't be able to tell you there. I've never seen any of the Man on Fire versions that exist.
That's a problem.
Maybe we'll do a Man on Fire series one day.
Okay.
I don't know if it was worth it, but
yeah, you totally distracted me with that.
Yeah, but I think it is funny that Aliens, and it's funny because I've always recognized it too, but I never put it together until I was actually researching this. There you go, 2 and 2.
How is it that we've never talked about John McTiernan?
He's a director who, in my head, I always feel like he's done more than he actually has. Like when I look at his list, there's only 12 credits, actually 11 with something that's been announced. He really just hasn't done much, and that always surprises me. I mean, he hasn't directed a film since 2003's Basic with John Travolta and Samuel L. Jackson that didn't do so well. And I don't know what kind of happened, but for a time he was kind of like one of the big action directors in the 80s, early 90s.
Let's see. I don't think I ever saw Nomads with Leslie Ann Down and Pierce Brosnan.
I didn't either.
But after that was his first director credit. Predator, Die Hard, Hunt for Red October, Medicine Man with Sean Connery and Lorraine Bracco. I have no memory of it if I saw it, but I'm cataloging that as never seen.
Meh.
And then Last Action Hero, Die Hard with a Vengeance. So from 87 to 95, he was pretty steady with movies that were very high on my list of action esteem.
I'd even go up to, I mean, maybe not 13th Warrior, but the Thomas Crown Affair remake that he did in 99. I quite enjoyed that remake.
I did too, again with Pierce Brosnan. I thought that was great. I think I'm not sure. Are we kind of alone there?
That would be an interesting one to do in a Movies in the Remakes series again, because I remember thinking that they did a pretty good job with the remake. So I'd be curious to revisit the pair of those. I can't remember what the general consensus was of that as a remake, but I remember enjoying it.
I think we might be on our own.
We might be.
It's over the 6-star
before.
It is. Anyway, okay. So, what do we think of John McTiernan in his direction of this film?
What I like about McTiernan is he definitely is a director who is always thinking about his job as a director, and listening to him talk about just kind of decisions he makes and things he thinks about. There may be elements in some of his films that I don't like as much, or some of his films that I just don't think are as good. But I think he is a very aware director, and listening to him just kind of talking about like he was really inspired by some of the European films that had come out in the earlier 80s. And just the way that the Europeans were moving their camera in a way that was more of kind of not necessarily movement just based on character movement, but based on kind of emotional beats and stuff. And I found that really interesting, that he latched onto that and was really inspired by that, which is one of the reasons actually he brought on Jan de Bont as his cinematographer, because he felt Jan de Bont's camera work in some of his earlier European films had that sort of movement, and he wanted to bring that over. And I think that is something that is very prevalent throughout this film, and something that I think just another addition that makes this film feel so just modern and alive, as opposed to if you go back to some older action films that may not have as much of that sort of movement in them. I think he's a smart director.
I think he is too. You can see little hints of that movement. The scene that sticks out to me is the scene where we first see it's where Gruber is leading Joe Takagi into the executive suite, and it opens with and Alexander, you saw the breadth of his domain, he wept, for there were no more worlds to conquer. I just love that entire sequence, the way the camera moves in particular, but that this introduces McClane to Gruber from a distance, from under the table that has the model on it. There's this great shot where we have the camera, it moves down. We're focusing on McClane as he's on his knees peeking over the table, and as the camera moves down following McClane to under the table, it pulls focus from McClane to this truck that's in the foreground, a model truck in the foreground on the table, and then back to McClane, as if our eyes are changing focus with it and moving under the table with him. It's just a really artful move, and this film is full of a lot of those little moments of how he chooses to move the camera to focus on little details and pull in and out of the full depth of the scene. And I think it's really smart, but also artful, particularly in a movie, again, that is so commercial action.
It's so strange that I noticed that exact same camera movement. I'm just like, that's such an interesting thing for us to pull focus to. But here we are kind of really paying attention to that model for some reason. And I found that a very interesting element that he chose to do. So yeah, pretty interesting.
It's a funny homage to the distance that we have to attune ourselves to in the scene, right? Because we have to learn from his position, from McClane's position under the table, we have to learn what's going on in the other room, and we can't hear it as well. So it puts us in a position of deficit. And I find that, what he does visually with what we also have to deal with orally is really special in that sequence.
Yeah, it's really nicely done, as we are very much often with McClane as he's kind of sneaking in and eavesdropping on this pretty horrific scene that he sees play out before him.
It is really violent, and in fact, this is the most violent scene in the film. I think when you look at just straight human on human violence. Did this strike you at all when Gruber assassinates Takagi?
I don't know if I'd say it's the most violent. It certainly is the most violent in context of a straight up assassination, that just cold blooded murder. I mean, it's pretty horrific the way that Hans is just like, fine, and just shoots him. It's pretty horrific. I mean, I think there's also
because there's no context of a fight here, right? This is just an assassination, and that's something that was kind of new.
Well, I think that's why. Because I mean, later, I think it's pretty horrific and bloody when the terrorist is running toward McClane and he shoots out his legs, and you just see all the squibs going off on his legs as the guy collapses down. That's pretty awful and bloody, as great a moment as it is in context.
Well, and the hanging of Carl at the end, I think, is also as he's just beating him up. They're beating each other up, and he hangs him with a chain.
You're right. There are a lot of pretty horrific moments, but you're right. But in context of the assassinations, this is really pretty overt and powerful. And I think it's interesting, again, going back to John McTiernan and some of his decisions about making this movie. He was really hesitant when he first signed on to make this film that was adapted from this book, because he really didn't want to do a summer movie, kind of an action summer light movie that dealt with terrorists, because, by nature of terrorists and terrorism, he felt it was such a dark subject and you couldn't make a fun movie about it. And he was really nervous about that. And so he really did latch onto this idea of them being robbers, and kind of eliminated had the writers eliminate the whole terrorist element out of the book and use that as kind of their cover. And I think that worked so effectively in making this film a much more of a, quote, summer movie, while still allowing these dark moments with Hans to be the effective bad guy and have the dark moments still within context of the story.
Shall we bust through the other cast members we haven't mentioned in sort of a little bit of a rapid fire?
Bust away.
Here we go. Bonnie Bedelia as Holly Gennaro McClane.
Bruce Willis saw her in the movie Heart Like a Wheel and thought she'd be great in this, and she is. I mean, she is so much more than the damsel in distress, and I think that's a highlight, is having her as the wife. Yes, he does kind of have to save her at the end, but she's a pretty tough cookie, and I think she holds her own against Hans.
Reginald VelJohnson, Al Powell.
Love him. I think this kind of is the thing that gave him his career, because it set him up as such a brilliant partner, kind of a sidekick, if you will, for McClane, that really kind of gave him his career in the TV show Family Matters. I don't know if I can effectively piece those together, but I think judging by the timeline, it lines up pretty well.
I really like Reginald VelJohnson. I wish he were in, I don't know. The guy's got 104 credits. So saying that I wish he were in more stuff is a little bit unfair. He's in a lot of stuff, and he's working actively right now, but he's working actively on things that I don't think show off enough of Reginald VelJohnson. He feels like a guy who's been a little bit too typed, and that's unfortunate.
He was in the first Die Hard. We'll talk about him next week in Die Hard 2. But he was also Sergeant Al Powell in the Die Hard Nakatomi Plaza video game that came out in 2002, the Die Hard Vendetta video game that also came out in 2002, and he was in the short film A Die Hard Christmas Party with Reginald VelJohnson in 2013. He's okay. Kept his Die Hard career active.
You're right. You've got it. You're right. I should have seen all of those. How about Paul Gleason as Deputy Police Chief Dwayne T. Robinson?
This is an interesting character, because I think that there is some debate about if his just constant naysaying to everything that Sergeant Powell is doing is effective police work or if he's really just kind of undermining the story a little bit. I would say that he is a quibble that I have, but certainly nothing that's ever driven me too crazy. I don't really mind it. I know Roger Ebert really didn't like him as a character, but for me, it's like he's kind of the foil, and I get it.
I do too. I think he's funny. The foil actually serves a really good purpose in this film. We get a little humor that punctuates every bit of the more gruesome action, and it's like clockwork.
I would go so far as to say he's my General Hux of this movie. Take that, naysayers.
Oh, Andy. That may have been the last nail. I'm sorry. William Atherton plays Richard Thornburg.
Well, Wolfgang and I are very close friends.
We put those back to back for a reason. I think Gleason and Atherton. They're both just generally terrible.
Atherton is so great as the Nightcrawler reporter, though, isn't he? I mean, I think that he works so well in this and the next movie. I look forward to talking about him more in Die Hard 2.
Me too. How about James Shigeta as Joe Takagi, briefly?
I don't have much to say about him other than I think that he does an effective job playing the Japanese businessman who, for some reason, has his Christmas party with his employees still working on Christmas Eve.
Yeah, nobody seems to have a problem with that. Well, it was the 80s, man.
That's
Different
right.
times.
Different times.
Alexander Godunov as Karl Reski. Oh, Alexander. What a beautiful specimen of a man.
I loved him in Money Pit, which he did a couple years before this.
Yes.
He was so great in that movie. And then here he turns up as Carl. And I just love him. He's so interesting because he wasn't really an actor, although he had started acting a little bit before this. But he was a ballet dancer, trained classical ballet dancer in the USSR, where he defected from in 1979 before coming here and doing more ballet here. And and then got into acting. Only did 10 credits, and he sadly died at the age of 45, which is really frightening considering the ages that we are right now.
Shut up, Andy.
Did I just say that?
God. Man.
Bringing it down. Merry Christmas, everybody.
Each side of the good versus evil in this film has their own smartass. Devereaux White plays Argyle, Clarence Gilliard Jr. as Theo the hacker. I don't know. Are these guys, am I unfairly pairing them?
I mean, Argyle and Theo, it's just, I think that it works well just because Argyle, he's the one who takes Theo down in the ending.
Yep.
I think they end up being kind of their own little pair. Although largely not across the course of the film. But Argyle is a fun little character to kind of have in McClane's corner. Theo is a really interesting guy because he's just kind of, I don't want to call him a goofball, but he certainly is more of the comedian type that is working with Hans. And he has got that great lines like, "You didn't bring me for my good looks," or whatever he says.
For my charming personality.
Yeah, for a charming personality, right.
Arguably, I think we did.
Yeah.
Al Long, I put him on here as Uli. He's one of the henchmen, one of the dozen, the Dirty Baker's dozen. This is the second time I think this is only the second time we've done an Al Long movie. Vehicle, right? Lethal Weapon and Die Hard. Have we done any more?
No, but we should do Big Trouble in Little China. I don't know why we still have not talked about that film.
Yeah,
probably because we're idiots. What's fun about him is that, you get this kind of this group of these German terrorists, and then randomly one of them is this Asian guy. It's like, it's kind of an odd little guy to throw into the German terrorists, but I guess we're trying to, be, open and kind of allow for anybody to be a part of our terrorist organization, which I think is fantastic. And I do love the moment. He's got the best, I think for me, the highlight of all the terrorist moments is, okay, here he is in this building, taking hostages, stealing money and all this. But then it's like he's about to steal a candy bar and he kind of looks around first like, should I do it? Like debating if he should steal a candy bar or not. And what's funny is he grabs a candy bar, and then when it cuts back to him later, he's eating it. He has a different wrapper in his hand, meaning he's gone through several candy bars.
He, he's best known as a stuntman and as an other guy, right? He's as the token kind of Asian terrorist gang member, Yakuza. That's kind of his role. But he did direct a film in 2000. He wrote and directed "Daddy, Tell Me a Story," and the taglines here: "Finding the truth can be murder. Everyone has a story to tell. Everyone is a suspect." And I have never heard of that film, but I know that we should add it on our list pretty quickly.
It's an 8.1 on IMDb.
Yeah, out of 8 reviews.
not many reviews, but still.
And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And there are actually 8 people listed in primary cast roles. So I wonder
who were those 8 people?
If there's a connection. And one of them is Al Long as Al Kabong. In that movie. So add that to your list, everybody. We'll be talking about that soon.
There you go.
We do have the 2 Agent Johnsons, Robert Davi as Special Agent Big Johnson and Grand L. Bush as Agent Little Johnson. No relation.
The Johnsons.
Yeah.
I love it.
Again, foils. It's interesting that all the foils are, the police officers. They all, that's the cultural statement is the police officers are boobs.
Yes, exactly. And then you have the fantastic moment where Big Johnson, as they're flying in the helicopter, this is just like the jungles of Nam. Or whatever it's like, right. Oh boy, here we go.
Yeah, that's it. Yep, we all have guns and are part of gangs. Isn't that what we learned last week?
I'm surprised that we didn't, that neither of us looked up. We don't have any IMFDB information on this movie, which we should. But if anyone were to do that, it would be Agent Johnson. He's the one who would be all over the IMFDB chart.
That's right.
With this movie.
Right.
And then I just had to say Rick Duckerman, he's one of those little actors who pops up here and there. We talked about him in Groundhog Day. And here he's just got the random little moment of Walt, the city worker, who's, popping out of the manhole cover. It's such a funny little bit.
This movie opened July 13th, 1988. And of note, we still talk about these special releases, the big releases. And this was one, even in 88, they were still talking about the fact that it opened in 25 cities in 70 millimeter 6-track Dolby. And this was Bruce Willis was promoting this movie on Oprah. And at the time, if you go find this interview, you'll see he's dressed like Don Johnson. I don't know why I find that weird. And he says, it's opening this way in only 25 cities. And that's something we haven't done since Star Wars, he says. So that was still a big deal in 88. And in 88, I still have it in my head that we were seeing movies pretty regularly in 70 mil. But I guess that was already a thing. Time has eroded.
I wonder if it was more
of production.
I think more of it might have just been the 6-track Dolby. I don't know. It's interesting. I think the pair of it, the 70 millimeter and the 6-track Dolby, I think it's an interesting set of things to be aware of, because I don't think that they actually shot this in 70 millimeter, did they?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, so it's interesting that they must have done a blow up for it. So this, of course, is the movie that spawned the whole idea of Die Hard in a movies, or at least as far as the way that people would pitch movies, right? So you'd have, it's Die Hard, but in a battleship, and that was Under Siege. Die Hard in an airplane was Passenger 57. Die Hard on a bus. Die Hard on an island. Die Hard at the White House. Die Hard with snakes on a plane. It's all of a sudden it was just like this never-ending idea of being able to pitch this thing. And I think that it's funny that it created this whole concept of this one man against this multitude of bad guys in kind of an isolated setting, and it created its own thing.
Talk to me about Frank Lloyd Wright, Andy.
This movie. I think it's funny that the the production designer latched onto this whole idea of Frank Lloyd Wright as kind of a concept for the Japanese construction here, and where the 30th floor where the holiday party is, you've got this recreation of Frank Lloyd Wright's designed house Falling Water, which has this large rock with water dripping from it right in the center of it. And his whole concept was that Nakatomi had all this money. They bought this whole Frank Lloyd Wright design only to reassemble it in their lobby of their building, which was very funny. And then, of course, at the in the part where they bring Takagi, you have that really interesting bridge design, the model where Hans is talking about building models and everything. The model right there is actually Frank Lloyd Wright's butterfly wing bridge model, which is something that they had brought in to put on display as if it was theirs. So nice little nods to the design of Frank Lloyd Wright.
Benefits of a classical education.
There you go.
You found the Guys Night music video.
Oh,
the Die Hard Guys Night music video. Andy, that is brilliant.
I don't know what's more brilliant is watching their video or watching their interview talking about the video, because they're talking about their buddy John McClane and how John McTiernan had gone in and made this documentary about him and everything. They're absurd just listening to these guys talk. It's very funny, but the music video is just fantastic. Of celebrating at least the first 4 films. Good stuff. And
that they keep adding to it, right? I mean, that's the idea, right? Because they did it originally with 3. Is that what you told me? And then they went back and added 4?
They added 4, per the studio. The studio actually pulled the plug on them because they were using footage from the movies, only to realize, hey, these guys might actually be able to help us do some unique marketing for the 4th movie. So let's bring them back in and let's let them use it, and they can write another round. Although I don't think they did for the 5th movie. So, but everybody needs to watch it at least once.
Stupid licensing. So we'll put that in the show notes. That's awesome. How to do it awards season.
For an action film, I guess you could say it did well in its the expected categories. It had 7 wins and 6 nominations. At the Oscars, it was nominated for Best Sound, lost to Clint Eastwood's Bird. Best Film Editing, Best Sound Effects Editing, and Best Visual Effects, lost to Who Framed Roger Rabbit for all of those. But it's
rightfully so.
That was a pretty groundbreaking film. But still, it was nice to see that it did get nominations for it. And it did, a few other places the film itself did get recognized, like the Japanese Academy nominated or had it win for Best Foreign Language Film. So
obviously we're doing this as a launch of our Die Hard series. So clearly there are sequels.
Yes, we will be talking about the sequels, and I guess we're not necessarily talking about the prequel, but we'll certainly be just having it in our conversation, the fact that there is talk of a prequel being made, right?
From what I understand, it's not a complete prequel. So it's a prequel, but it does take place in 2 timelines. So we will see Bruce Willis's John McClane if this thing gets made. And a lot of the movie will be told through flashback.
So does that make it a prequel sequel?
Yes, it does. Now it does. A sprequel?
Oh my goodness.
So that's the unfortunate reality of whatever comes next in the Die Hard universe. But we are going to be talking about the others.
Oh yes.
Did you ever play any of the video games?
I didn't. Although now we know that at least Reginald Bell Johnson did make an appearance in several of them.
I need an emulator, man. I want to play that something fierce.
That's hilarious. I never read the comic book either, but I know they did adapt it. It's been a popular enough film where just this year, 2017, the U.S. National Film Registry did select it for preservation. So it's a popular one.
Let's do the numbers.
So McTiernan's action thriller cost a wee $28 million to make, which is so funny thinking about it. $56.8 million in today's dollars, which is just so small of a budget considering what modern action budgets cost, right? The movie had a limited 21 screen release on July 15th, 1988, opposite Clint Eastwood's The Deadpool and Disney's Bambi reissue. Didn't make much of a splash, and Coming to America still held the #1 spot. Did have a much wider release a week later on the 22nd, opposite Midnight Run, Big Top Pee-wee, and Caddyshack 2, but still only hit 3rd. coming in behind Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which was on its 5th week of release, and coming to America in its 4th. In fact, this movie only ever got up to 2nd place, which was in its 5th week of release. That being said, it did hold strong in 2nd, 3rd, or 4th spot each week for 12 straight weeks, lasting in theaters for 16 weeks. The movie did end up grossing $83 million domestically and $57.8 million internationally, making a total of $285.7 million in today's dollars. It was the 7th highest grossing film of 1988 and the 3rd highest grossing R-rated film that year. Rain Man was number 1 in both cases. All told, the movie ended up with an adjusted profit per finished minute of $1.7 million. Certainly a great success for such a great film.
While you were reading, I don't want you to think I don't pay attention to you, but what I'm really paying attention to is this fantastic YouTube walkthrough, 16 minutes of the first of Die Hard Nakatomi Plaza, which was actually released on PC in 2002. Oh
my.
And it is a first-person shooter, and I'm in it now. I'm watching it right now, and this is fantastic. It's like the audio is all straight from the movie, all the way down to "Come on, come to Papa, I'll kiss your effing Dalmatian." Like they've got the whole thing. It's great.
That's hilarious.
I know, right? Oh man, I can tell what's going to happen to my day.
Consider it gone.
I love that we're talking about this series, Andy. I don't know what else there is to say other than great movie. Makes me want to kiss a Dalmatian.
I already have. No, it is a fantastic movie, and definitely a Christmas favorite, something that we always love to watch. One of my wife's and my favorite films to watch together. And yeah, I'm glad we're doing the whole series. I love most of these films. I have some issues there throughout, but it's an awfully fun series of films to watch. Although I still haven't seen the 5th one. This is going to be my first time finally watching the 5th one.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
I'm excited about that.
I can't wait for that.
I know.
All right, then it's time, Andy. It's time for us to rank it.
Let's do it.
Head over to flickchart.com/thenextreel. You'll see our list of movies, or swipe over in your show notes and you'll see a link to Flickchart. That'll take you straight to this movie, or you can add it to your catalog, and let's see how they stack up. Where do we start?
First up, Die Hard or Star Trek Beyond?
Die Hard.
Definitely Die Hard. Die Hard or Seven Samurai? Kurosawa and one of his great films. I'm still going Die Hard, though.
I'm going Die Hard. I feel like this is going to be a movie of shoulds. I know I should pick Seven Samurai, but I'm not going to.
Well, maybe. We'll see. Die Hard or Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan?
Die Hard.
Die Hard for me. Die Hard or Children of Men? Die Hard for me.
Die Hard, yeah.
Die Hard or Jaws?
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm going with Jaws.
Jaws.
But boy, it's getting up there. Die Hard or Inception? I'm going to say Die Hard.
I'm going to say Inception.
Oh, really? Interesting. Yeah. Interesting. Well, let's do a little Rochambeau, shall we?
Here we go.
All right. 1, 2, 3. Rock.
Scissors.
Rock.
I don't feel bad about that.
I was tempted to say glass. But only if you would say bare feet.
Oh, that's so good. We have to add that because rock beats. Oh, see, the problem is rock, scissors, and glass beat bare feet. Bare feet's a tough one.
It is. It is. Really is. Okay, next up we have Die Hard or Touch of Evil.
Die Hard.
Yeah, I'm going to say Die Hard. Die Hard or Groundhog Day. Die Hard for me. Oh, that's a tough one, though.
Yeah. Not that tough.
Not that. That's really not that tough. Well, that puts Die Hard at number 11 on our flick chart. Number 11 out of 331.
That's fascinating. How did it get there? We picked Die Hard every single choice, and it only made it to 11?
Jaws. Jaws is number 10.
Jaws. That's right. We didn't pick it. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And I'm assuming that this ends up as a 5-star and a heart for you.
Oh, absolutely. This movie is on my own personal chart. It's 45 out of 3885, which puts it at a 99%. So, I mean, this is absolutely just one of my all-time favorites. Always will be. I like I said, there might be quibbles, but they're lovable quibbles that I have with it. I really just enjoy absolutely everything in this film, and I love watching it.
Lovable quibbles.
Are they quibbles if you love them?
Are they? This is for me also. But weirdly, it's 57 on my play chart. I must have run into some things when I ranked this the first time. 57 out of 1006. So technically, that should be a 4.5 star at 94 out of 100. But it's definitely a 5-star. Something is amiss on my chart.
Screwy. Something is screwy. Yes, indeed.
Something screwy. Yeah. But this is a fantastic film. Okay, that means next week we're running straight into Die Hard 2.
Yep.
Where we will, presumably, die harder.
Presumably, yes, indeed. Yeah, 2 years later, we're going to be jumping into that Rennie Harlan action film. So it'll be interesting to see his take on this franchise.
This is awesome. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, downloading, listening. Thanks for your patience. This is another long one, but, our favorite films deserve long conversations. So I think that's it. This movie has ended, Andy, and you know what happens when the movie ends.
Our conversation begins.
Amazon giveth, Andy.
As Amazon always doeth. It's the holidays. Amazon's giving.
Amazon is so giving, but not to the people who feel deeply wronged by Amazon.
No, not to them.
This movie has ruined actually a series of holidays, according to the collection of reviews. It's ruined what did you find?
A Valentine's Day?
Okay, yeah. Valentine's Day is ruined. Christmas has definitely been ruined. All thanks to Amazon. I haven't found an Arbor Day yet, but I'm always on the lookout for Amazon ruined my Arbor Day. But what we do have, while there aren't very many 1-star reviews, we do have a few that are delicious.
Yes, we do.
Well, my first one is from OKG853, who says this movie is highly overrated. I agree with Die Hard. I think that's a play on Die Hard.
Oh, they're clever.
First, the positive. Bruce Willis is very nice eye candy. But in addition to being too long, it has too many characters. It's so predictable. It tries too hard, and as a result, it's laughable. It reminded me of The Towering Inferno. I fell asleep watching it.
Ouch.
Oh, that's too bad. So again, a review that is bad based on a movie this person hasn't seen the entire thing. I'm sorry.
Oh, we love those.
Mm-hmm. Die Hard.
Die Hard. Well, I've got a 1-star that is labeled a kid's review, and it says inappropriate. Yes, this is the R-rated film. I bought this for my 3-year-old and was shocked to see how violent and filthy it was. The F word was used many times, and there were many scenes with shooting and death and violence. Terrible. By the way, I'm posting my name the way it is, so nobody will know my email address. Probably
Andy,
smart. Probably smart.
There is nothing in this movie that indicates it's for kids. What?
Especially a 3-year-old kid.
I love the comments are so good. If only there was some way the content was rated so you could figure this out before showing it to your kids. Good point. I've always felt this was very odd for a Disney movie.
Oh, maybe Disney will do an animated remake. If they can do an animated Hunchback of Notre Dame, why not an animated Die Hard?
You're the best. I disagree. My 3-year-old loved this movie.
Oh, Merry Christmas,
for this
Amazon.
And so many other things. Thank you. Thank you so much, Amazon.
It's hard to believe that we have been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
You're telling me producing this show week after week requires a ton of work behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our originals page when shopping for books and movies we've covered.
Just visit thenextreel.com/originals. Your purchases made through our links give us a small commission at no extra cost to you and allow us to keep having these great conversations.
I was so excited for our big Star Trek film franchise series this season. All those movies adapted from Gene Roddenberry's original 1960s TV show.
As a huge fan, I know that you geeked out over analyzing the adaptations.
Absolutely. From the motion picture to the Kelvin timeline films, seeing the Enterprise cruise on the big screen was a dream come true.
Our list of source material isn't just all books and plays. We have the original series in our list of source material. You can rent the episodes to watch and enjoy, and support the show in the process.
For our Millennium Trilogy series, we covered films adapted from the original books that launched Lisbeth Salander, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, The Girl Who Played with Fire, and The Girl Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest.
As much as I love Fincher's version, the original Swedish versions are the way to go. We also did our Die Hard series in Season 7.
I can't believe Die Hard and Die Hard 2 were adaptations. Two of the greatest action movies ever.
Well, one of them at least. The other is awfully fun, though. We revisited the classic Mary Poppins for our 1960s movie musical series. A spoonful of sugar always helps the medicine go down.
Old Boy was intense for our Park Chan-wook Vengeance trilogy, and East of Eden and Giant were highlights of our James Dean series.
And a fun time travel mind bender with Predestination to cap things off.
Find all the books behind these adaptations and more at thenextreel.com/originals.
Dive into the source material for your favorite movies. Check it out today, thenextreel.com/originals.